Welcome back, Undertakers. If you've ever wanted to know how to trim and separate a brisket, today's your lucky day because I'm going to show you. Now, I've got a whole what they call packer brisket here. This is about 14 pounds. And I'm going to show you how to trim it, how to separate the point from the flat. In a future video, spoiler alert, I'll show you how to cook it. But today, I'm just going to show you how to trim it and separate it. So, if you already know how to do this and you're watching, do me a favor. Now's your chance. Go take out the trash, go use the restroom, let my video play so I get credit for someone watching my video. If you're tuning in because you want to see how to do this, keep watching and I'll show you how to do that. So if you've ever seen one of these in a store and you're just like, wow, that's a big piece of meat and it seems sort of intimidating and you don't know what to do, you've never bought it because you're a little bit, not really afraid, but you're a little, it's more than you want to tackle. It's real easy to do, so I'll show you how to do it. Maybe you just got a new smoker and you're looking to break it in and now you're looking to get into being able to smoke some brisket. I'll show you how to do it. So step one, we're going to take this, I'm going to cut this plastic off and then I'm going to rinse it under some cold water, dry it off, and then I'll meet you back here and show you how we're going to trim it up. Alright, so now this has been washed and dried off, now we're ready to start trimming. But before we get there, you'll notice this meat will have quite a bit of fat on it. And the meat does have a lot of marbling in it. And if that bothers you, this is probably not the cut of meat for you. Now, even though this side here has a fat cap over the whole top, we're not going to take that all off. So once we're done trimming, there's still going to be some fat that we're going to purposely leave on here. And there's going to be marbling in the meat. So if that's something you don't like, do yourself a favor, don't buy a brisket. Go buy a tenderloin, you'll be much happier with that. Now, if you do want to make this brisket, the reason we're not going to trim all the fat off is you want to leave some on there because we're going to cook this for a long time. And whether you cook it over high heat or low heat, it's still going to take hours for this to cook. So you want to leave some fat on there, that way as the fat renders or melts, it'll keep the meat juicy, it'll keep it from getting dried out, and it's going to be great in the end. So a lot of the fat will render off, so once it's done cooking, you won't see the fat anymore because it'll have dripped off and it'll be gone, but it'll serve a purpose in the meantime. Now there's some fat, like this big thick fat cap here, and you can tell by feeling it. This fat has, I mean, it's really almost like hard. It doesn't squish very well. That you can take off because that fat will never render. It'll never go away. When you're done cooking, it'll still be there. What we're going to leave is some of the thinner fat that's a little bit more like what you think of when you think of fat. You know, it's a little bit softer fat. We'll leave some of that on there. And then also what you're going to want to remove, if there's any tough like silver skin, or some of the stuff is not really fat, it's more like a connective tissue, cut that all off because that'll never go anywhere. But you'll see that as we kind of go along. And it's hard to tell now because of the fat and everything that's on here, but there is actually two pieces of meat here. And as we go, we'll trim off. You can see there's kind of a fat vein that runs right through here. So this piece here is going to be called the point. And it's called that because once you get all the fat off, you'll see it's sort of a triangular shaped piece of meat. And then the other piece is going to be this piece here, which is called the flat. So we'll separate those, so we'll have a flat, and then we'll have the point. And I'll show you how to do that. And the only other thing you really need, you just need one tool for this job. You'll need a nice sharp knife. You don't necessarily need one that's large. I like it because it's got a really grippy handle, so it's easy to keep a hold of while your hands are wet. And it is really sharp, and it works through this bigger fat really nice. But any sharp knife will do. So I'm going to get another plate, and as I trim the fat off, I'm going to put that on a plate to sort of give you an idea of how much, you know, we're going to trim off of there. And it'll vary from piece to piece, you know, some will have more fat than others, and this is about a 14-pound piece of meat, so if you get a larger one, you'll have more. But keep in mind, whenever you buy a brisket, you're going to have some waste, there's going to be some throwaway, so you are going to pay for some fat that, you know, you're just going to throw in the trash. That's just the way it is, the price you pay for having some brisket. So let me bring in and give you a little bit closer view and I'll show you how I trim it up. Alright, so when I start trimming, I'll start on the fatty side first usually. And now this whole side facing you is going to be, there's a big piece of fat there. And you can see it's a good sized thick piece. And we need to get rid of that. So just start at one side, be careful, don't cut yourself. And you don't have to go all the way through, don't try to take it all off in one piece. Just get it started. Just work your way down, because the last thing you want to do is go in here and start, you know, getting too excited, and next thing you know, you've hacked off a big piece of meat with it. So you don't want to do that. So just take your time, just kind of work your way down. So there, I started getting into some meat right there. So let's kind of get out of there. Now go slow. There's no reason to be in a rush here. Last thing you want to do is end up in the emergency room because you cut yourself, or getting mad because you wasted too much meat when you got in a hurry and trimmed off too much of it. Okay, so now I've got that big thick vein of fat that ran across there that was no good, so now that's gone. Now something else I should mention, this is not a competition trim. You know, if you're going to cook this in a competition, they do it a little bit different. This is more for just, you know, your average home cook that's going to do this themselves. So now that that's all off, and you can see I didn't get 100%, don't go crazy sitting here trying to get every little piece of fat off. As long as you get that big thick piece off, that's not going to render. This stuff will melt and go away, so we're okay there. And then for the rest of this, just try to go through and get some of the stuff that feels sort of tough and like it's not very good and it's a little slimy. Just go ahead and trim that off. But you want to leave some of this, so this thin fat, you'll be okay. Alright, so that's pretty good on that side. Like I say, you're never going to get all of it off. This is just going to help us. It's going to get rid of that fat that's not very good. And this is going to help us when we start to separate the point from the flat. We can kind of see better what we're doing. Now, if you need to, depending on the size of your smoker and how much room you have to cook, once I separate these, I'll show you. You may want to go through like I did right here. I kind of cut this flat right around here. Even though I lost a little bit of meat. You may want to go through and like I've got this little flap here that sticks out. Eventually I may end up chopping that off just so you have a nice, more even shaped piece of meat. Alright, so now I've flipped it over and you can see on this side there's not nearly as much fat. We've got more of like this kind of connective-y tissue stuff, and we'll take some of that off. And there is another big piece of fat over here. We're going to want to take this off. Now, it's hard to describe this through a video. I mean, you won't really get a good feel of how this is done until you have one in front of you and you can actually feel the difference in the fats. Then you'll understand. And this is only hard the first time. So if you're ever thinking about doing this and you want to cook a brisket, just buy one and trim it up. The worst you can do is, whoops, I cut off a big chunk of meat. Just don't cut yourself. That'd be bad. But other than that, if you completely hack this thing apart, you can still cook it and you can still eat it, and then you learn from your mistake. But don't be intimidated by this. You can do it. It's not that hard. Okay, so this side wasn't so bad, a lot less trimming to do. So now that we have the front and back both trimmed up, both sides done, At this point, if you want, you can just cook this whole. That's typically what I do. I cook this as one piece of meat. I don't separate the point from the flat. But some people do. Some people like to have the point and they like to take and make burn ends out of it. Some people like to have the flat separate and it just makes it easier for them. So however you want to do it is up to you. But for the purpose of this video, I'm going to show you how to separate them. So if you want to cook it whole, stop right now. You're good to move on to the cooking part. If you want to separate it, it's real easy. You just need to find out the point is going to be kind of a triangular shaped piece of meat right here. And then the flat runs under it. And if you look, you can kind of tell where the grain of the meat runs. On the point here, it's running directly this way. On the flat, it's moving this way a little bit more. And you can kind of tell right along in here is where you want to get in. But that's, if you've done this before and you can recognize that, you can do that. But really, you want to kind of go back here on the back and go in this fat part right here. There's a nice layer of this fat, and you just want to work your way right along in that fat ridge and just start cutting through that fat. And that fat line will guide you how to cut through here to separate these into two pieces. Alright, so after working at it, you can tell, you know, here was this layer of fat right here. We just worked our way right through here. So now we've got the point becoming separated from the flat. And we're almost done. We're almost up here, you know, where it's going to connect right in here. So we'll pop out right in here somewhere where they'll come apart. And the point is thicker on this end and it gets thinner as you go. So be careful. So just keep working your way. Just trim a little bit. Pull some back, cut some fat. And just keep working your way through there. And there you go. Now we've got two pieces of meat. So here's our point. And if you want, you can go through and trim a little bit of this fat. It's not really hurting anything. This big piece up here, it's rare you'll ever get that all out of there. So you can just leave it in there and cut it off when you're done cooking. But if you want to take this piece right here, make some burn ends, cut it into pieces. You can cook it whole if you want to. And then here's your flat. And the flat's typically what you see if you go to a restaurant and they're selling brisket. They've cooked the flat and then they sliced it. So there you have it. There's nothing to it. A perfectly trimmed and separated brisket. All you need is a little patience and a sharp knife and you're all set. You can do it. So like I mentioned before, it's a little tough to kind of describe through a video, you know, how fat feels. But once you get this and you open it up and you start to work on it, you'll be able to tell where that really hard fat is, you know, that big thick stuff. Cut that all out of there. Trim as much or as little as you want off of there. If you want to cook it as one piece, go ahead. If you want to separate it, I showed you that's fairly simple. You just follow that fat line and just work your way through, slowly peel it back, and boom, you've got two perfectly separated pieces of meat for your brisket. And it's really easy to do. So if you've ever been kind of scared or intimidated on how to do a brisket, just get it. The first time is the worst. And as long as you don't cut yourself, hey, it was a success. So I know this wasn't the most exciting video ever, but if you stuck through me to the end, thanks for watching. I sure appreciate it. If you did watch this far, I hope you learned something, and I hope you give this a try. Make some brisket. You can do it. I know you can do it. It's not that hard. So as always, thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.